Today we tackle life's greatest question. Which is the better platform to build a track car from? A decade-old F-body or a brand new at the time Boss 302? I've put off making this video for a few months now because there's just no way that I can convey how awesome it was to chase an 8-minute lap of the Nurburgring with my best friend and 2 American muscle cars. The only thing I can say is just thank you again to the US taxpayers who made it all possible. I think this is a particularly interesting comparison because these 2 cars represent both the best and the last from each manufacturer of a distinctly American invention, the cheap live-axle V8 muscle car. So first, let's take a look at how they compare on paper. Stock, the Firebird was around 100 pounds lighter than the Boss. Adam put the Boss on a diet, whereas I put the Firebird on a cocaine and juice cleanse. In their modified form, the Bird is lighter by a massive 334 pounds, or one average American. But it's not as much of an advantage as it seems at first, because almost all of the Boss 302's weight loss was from rotating mass, whereas the Firebird actually gained rotating mass in the form of larger wheels, tires, and brakes. The weight distribution appears to favor the Boss, but it's similarly misleading. The Mustang carries its weight higher up and closer to the front and rear of the car. Just look at where that engine's mounted. All the extra structure in the rear of the Mustang makes the chassis feel rock solid, even on rear springs that nearly double the stock spring rate, whereas the Firebird with much softer springs suffers a lot more body flex. The Boss 302 pays for that solid feeling though, with a much higher center of gravity, as anyone who's ridden both an Alligator and a Camel will tell you. Low CG makes all the difference. Even slammed to the pavement, you never completely shake the feeling that the Mustang has a CG problem, and that becomes even more apparent when you put sticky tires on it. Of course, we couldn't have a track test without a control tire. We went with the Toyo R888. I went for the smallest possible diameter I could get, so the Bird wears ultra low profile 285/30 18s stuffed onto a slightly too narrow 9.5-inch wheel. The Boss, on the other hand, wears taller staggered tires, 275 on the front, 295 on the rear, on more appropriate 9.5 and 10.5-inch wide wheels, overall giving the Boss a slight contact patch advantage. The cars wear identical 4-piston Brembo calipers, differing only in color and pad choice. The Boss 302 ran stock forward pads. The Firebird used a slightly more aggressive, but still a streetable pad. The Bird outright loses the stance contest to the Boss, but the Firebird's double wishbone front and torque-arm rear suspension offer a better camber curve at the front and better anti-dive squat characteristics at the rear of the car. But it's the powertrain where the cars really start to diverge. Originally, the Firebird's LS1 was rated at 305 horsepower. Of course, everyone knows LS1s made more than that. But even at its most anorexic race weight, the Firebird's tired old LS1 would have to make 402 horsepower to match the Boss 302 power to weight. Once you factor in the Mustang's gearing advantage, it has to make even more. Luckily, LS1s are freaks, and with just bolt-ons, it makes around 410 horsepower at the crank. That brings us to what is arguably the Boss 302's greatest advantage, its gearing. When GM went to a 6-speed in the early 90s, they added a second overdrive gear to a 5-speed, as a way to optimize the fuel economy and NVH of their big pushrod engines. When Ford finally went to a 6-speed 2 decades later, they stuffed an extra gear in between first and fourth, optimizing acceleration and making 5th gear 1-to-1. That close space gearing, 373 rear end, and nearly 2,000 RPM of extra usable rev range on the Boss 302 makes the Firebird feel almost VTEC-ish by comparison. In the Firebird, you often get stuck choosing between bouncing off the limiter in a lower gear or upshifting and lugging the engine in a higher gear. The Boss 302 never suffers this problem. There are always at least 2 gears that will keep you in the fat part of the power band on track. The cars were far better prepared for the Nurburgring than their drivers. Ab and I were both brand new to track driving, and we developed our driving styles around our car's strengths. With far less weight over the front axle, larger front tires, and an open diff, the Bird could pull off late braking corner entries that seemed to defy physics, even without functional ABS. So that's where I focused, not realizing that finding speed on corner exit is both more effective and less risky. The Boss, on the other hand, couldn't stop or turn in as well. But with its torsion diff and wider rear tires, it put down power so well it would make anyone question why Ford bothered to switch to an independent rear for the new Mustang. The answer, of course, is bumps. If you're going to drive a car in the street, you want an independent rear over a live axle for those bumps. Every single track briefing I've been to in the United States, they warn you of the dangers of the red mist. What they don't admit is that few things can make you feel that alive. And there is nothing like a fast car in front of you or in your mirrors to help you find speed on a track. That's doubly true of a track as complex as the Nurburgring. As we learned the track and how to drive, our lap times rapidly fell. Unfortunately, Adam's stay in Germany was cut short by the Army, but we squeezed in one last run of the ring. Our last lap of the ring was of course also our fastest. It was in heavy Sunday traffic, and as the two cars dropped into the carousel for the last time, the bird belched fire on the way to an 813. After Adam left, it just wasn't the same, so I took some time off from the Nurburgring. But the Sunday before the Firebird was to be loaded on a boat headed back to the States, I went back for the 2013 Old Timer Grand Prix. I got to meet Walter Roll and watch Derek Bell lap the Porsche 956 around the ring. In the hour-long tourist session after the Grand Prix, I and about 10,000 other fans jammed our way onto the track. The lap was looking to be well under 8 minutes, but as I was passing a Z3 on the run down to the foxhole, the engine stumbled. I knew immediately I'd made a mistake. I'd run too light a fuel load and the pump was cavitating. The only thing to do was to quit the run. Instead, knowing it was my last lap with the bird on the ring, I tried to find even more speed on the way into corners. And I still might have made it, except I came upon some Brits who decided to see what it was like going 3 wide on the narrow track. By the time I got past, it was over. As gantry rolled into sight, my foot flat to the floor, but the engine frustratingly silent. I looked at my watch and felt a crushing wave of defeat and exhaustion. I did the best I could with the chance I had. Going from a 12:30 to an 8:03 around the Nurburgring is no small feat. And a huge part of the ring's appeal is that there is no such thing as a perfect lap. You could lap the Nurburgring until the world's oil reserves ran out, and you'd still be chasing those last few tenths. Both cars could have gone well into the 7-minute range on a clear track, even with amateurs like us behind the wheel. And there is no doubt that of the two, the Boss 302 was faster. Yet not only did the Firebird do the fastest lap, it was out front every time we set a new best. The reason for this is another huge piece of the ring's appeal. It's dangerous, and the Boss 302 was too precious. The Firebird, on the other hand, was just a well-worn, disposable tool, and I think a perfect one for the job. Thanks for watching.